Meet Gwen, my journey to hypnotherapy. How life's unexpected detours can lead to your true calling. Sometimes the path to our purpose isn't a straight line. Sometimes it winds through challenges we never expected, pauses we didn't plan for, and moments that force us to discover strengths we didn't know we possessed. My journey to becoming a hypnotherapist began not in a classroom or clinic, but in the quiet hours of caregiving, when life asked me to step away from everything I thought defined me and discover who I really was underneath. For years I had been a community midwife, a role that filled me with purpose and pride. There's something profoundly moving about being present for one of life's most transformative moments, supporting women as they bring new life into the world. I love the work, the connection, the sense that I was making a real difference in families' lives. But life had other plans. When my husband's health began to decline, requiring months of intensive care and eventually 24/7 nursing support, I made the difficult decision to take an extended time off work. Suddenly, the woman who had spent her career caring for others found herself in the role of primary caregiver, navigating a world of medical appointments, insurance forms, and the emotional weight of watching someone you love struggle. Those months were among the most challenging of my life, but they were also unexpectedly transformative. With time away from my midwifery practice, I found myself searching for something to occupy, not just my time, but my mind and spirit. I'd already trained as a hypnobirthing instructor, a natural extension of my work supporting women through labour and delivery. The connection between mind and body during birth had always fascinated me, and I'd seen firsthand how powerful the proper mental preparation could be. But now, with space to breathe and think, I felt drawn to explore hypnotherapy more deeply. I enrolled in training, not knowing exactly where it would lead, but trusting that this pull toward understanding the mind's healing capacity meant something. What I discovered during my certification process surprised me. Hypnotherapy wasn't just going to be a tool I could offer others. It was going to transform my own life first. As I dived into hypnotherapy training, something unexpected happened. The techniques I was learning to help others weren't just theoretical concepts. They were holding up a mirror to my own limiting beliefs, patterns, and fears. For as long as I could remember, I had struggled with confidence. As a child, I was painfully self-conscious, the kind of kid who preferred to blend into the background rather than risk being noticed. This pattern followed me through school, where I second-guessed my abilities despite good grades, and into my working life, where I often felt like I was pretending to know more than I actually did. Even in social situations, that familiar voice would whisper, "What if they don't like you? What if you say the wrong thing? What if you're not enough?" I had become excellent at functioning despite these fears, successful in my career, respected by colleagues, loved by family and friends, the world. Through hypnotherapy training, I began to understand that these weren't character flaws or immutable truths about who I was. They were learned patterns stored in my subconscious mind that could be examined, understood, and transformed. Working through my own limiting beliefs during training was both challenging and liberating. I discovered that the confident, capable woman my colleagues and friends saw had always been there. She had just been overshadowed by old stories I'd been telling myself for decades. Through guided visualizations, regression work, and other hypnotherapeutic techniques, I began to trace these patterns back to their origins. I could see how a sensitive child had learned to protect herself by staying small. How a young woman had developed strategies to avoid rejection. How these protective mechanisms had both served and limited me over the years. But more importantly, I learned that these patterns could change. As I practiced the techniques I was learning, both on myself and with fellow students, I felt something shift. The voice of self-doubt grew quieter. The fear of judgment lost its grip. For the first time in my life, I began to honestly believe in my own worth, not because of what I could do or achieve, but simply because of who I was. The transformation was so profound that I knew I couldn't keep this tool to myself. If hypnotherapy could help a lifelong people pleaser finally believe in her own value, what might it do for other women struggling with their own invisible battles? As my husband's care needs stabilised, and I began to consider what retirement might look like, I realised something surprising. I wasn't ready to stop helping people heal. I was prepared to do it in a new way. The woman who had once been too self-conscious to speak up in meetings now felt confident enough to hang out her own shingle. The midwife who had supported women through physical birth was ready to help them through emotional and psychological rebirth. I completed my certification as a hypnotherapist and trained in rapid transformational therapy, knowing that this wasn't just a career change. It was the culmination of a journey that had been decades in the making. I share this journey not because it's unique, but because it's universal. Settling for lives that feel smaller than their spirits. They're successful on the outside, but struggling on the inside, not quite able to love themselves fully. If that describes you, I want you to know that your patterns aren't permanent. The beliefs that feel so true, so much a part of who you are actually learned responses that can be unlearned. The confidence you see in others isn't something they were born with that you missed out on. It's something that can be cultivated, reclaimed, remembered. My journey from self-conscious child to confident hypnotherapist wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about removing the barriers that had been hiding who I really was all along. Through my own transformation and the privilege of witnessing countless others, I've learned that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what was always whole. The anxious woman isn't broken. She's protecting a sensitive heart. The perfectionist isn't flawed. She's trying to ensure her worth. The people pleaser isn't weak. She's prioritising connection, sometimes at the cost of authenticity. Hypnotherapy doesn't judge these patterns or try to eliminate them through force. Instead, it creates a safe space to understand them, appreciate how they've served us, and gently guide them toward more supportive expressions. What started as a necessity, finding something meaningful to do during a difficult time, became a calling that has transformed not just my life, but my understanding of what's possible for all of us. Every woman who walks into my practice carries her own version of the story I lived for decades, capable and caring, successful and struggling, influential and somehow convinced she's not quite enough. And every session reminds me why this work matters so deeply. When we heal our relationship with ourselves, we change how we show up in the world. We make different choices, set different boundaries, pursue other dreams. We permit ourselves to take up space, to have needs, to believe in our own worthiness. The ripple effects extend far beyond our own lives, touching our relationships, our work, our communities, and the next generation that watches how we treat ourselves and learns what's possible. If you're listening to this and something resonates, if you recognise yourself in the woman who functions beautifully while carrying invisible doubts, know that transformation is possible at any stage of life. I was in my 60s when I finally learned to trust my own worth. You don't have to wait that long. The patterns that feel so permanent, the voices that seem so convincing, the fears that appear so justified, they're all workable, they're all changeable. They're all invitations to remember who you really are beneath the layers of protection and adaptation. Your journey might not look like mine. It probably won't involve unexpected caregiving or a career change and retirement. But the essence is the same. The willingness to look honestly at what's not working, the courage to believe that change is possible, and the commitment to treat yourself with the same compassion you'd offer a dear friend. The woman you're meant to be isn't someone you have to become. She's someone you have to remember. She's been there all along, waiting patiently for you to clear away everything that's been covering her light. And when you do, the world gets to experience the gift of who you really are. Confident, capable, and utterly worthy of the life you've always dreamed of living. This is the first in a series where I'll be sharing insights about women's mental health, hypnotherapy, and the journey to living authentically. If you're curious about how hypnotherapy might support your own healing journey, I invite you to explore the resources at GwenGouldTherapy.com.